Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to a complete and detailed Wriothesley guide. Wriothesley or Wriothesley or Wriothesley, I don't know, is the newest 5-star cryo DPS released in Genshin. And in today's video, I'm going to show you guys the best ways to build and play Wriothesley. We're going to cover his best artifacts, weapons, teams, constellations, combos, and so much more. Everything you need to know about Wriothesley in one complete video. I'm able to get this information early to you guys, as I did have a bit of time to play Wriothesley before he came out on a media server. And as always, if you want to catch me live, I do stream most nights on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested. And with all that out of the way, let's get right into it. All right, so starting things off, let's talk about what Wriothesley actually does, how his abilities work, and how to play him. First of all, as a cryo catalyst, all of his normal and charge attacks are going to deal cryo damage. He is a character who uses his fists, kind of punches enemies similar to Hazo, and has a very similar normal and charge attack. As a main DPS, Wriothesley typically does spam his normal attacks and also his enhanced charge attack, which we'll talk about shortly, as an on-field cryo carry who can enhance these attacks in many different ways. First of all, through his elemental skill Ice Fang Rush, Wriothesley will enter a special state named Chilling Penalty, where his normal attacks will do more damage if he is over 50% HP, but at the cost of some of his own HP. In fact, anytime you normal attack and hit an enemy, you will consume 4.5% of your max HP up to once every 0.1 seconds. On top of that, you will gain resistance interruption, which is really nice for just not getting knocked around, and a very significant increase to your normal attack's damage. Also worth noting that you lose your Chilling Penalty state if you swap out of your skill early, so try not to do that. This skill will last for 10 seconds and have a 16-second cooldown. Now, while Wriothesley will consume his own HP to deal more damage as he is normal attacking, he actually can kind of self-sustain this thanks to his first passive talent that will allow his charge attacks to not only become more powerful, but also heal him up if he's under 60% HP. In fact, when your HP drops below 60%, Wriothesley will gain a Gracious Rebuke stack, which will make it to where the next charge attack you do will not only gain 50% increased damage, but will also not consume any of your stamina, and then will heal you for 30% of your max HP. Because of this, you can go from just under 60% HP to around 90% instantly, allowing you to heal back up the damage you may have taken from using your elemental skill. Because of this, your Wriothesley can manage to stay above 50% HP at all times, so that your elemental skill will actually increase your normal attack's damage. Keep in mind that if you're not above 50% HP, if you're under half, then you won't get any of this bonus damage, and your normal attacks will be a lot worse. With that said, any HP amount above half will be good for your normal attacks, but if you want to also be able to do your very powerful charge attacks that will not consume stamina, do more damage, and also heal you, then you will need to be under 60% HP, so hovering around the 50 to 60% HP range is ideal if you also want a charge attack on your Wriothesley. If that wasn't enough, as your Wriothesley's HP changes, you will constantly be gaining stacks of your second passive talent, gaining 1 stack each time your HP increases or decreases, giving you 6% attack for each stack with a maximum stack count of 5. Because of this, you can gain up to 30% attack for free, which is just a nice bonus as your HP passively changes. For your elemental burst, Dark Gold Wolf Fight, this is a pretty straightforward one that is honestly similar to Wander's in the sense that it will do just multiple hits of damage. In fact, 5 hits of damage in front of him on top of an additional hit of Usia aligned crowd damage, which can be nice against certain enemies. Overall though, the main thing to know is that the scaling of this ability is pretty decent. It does an explosion in front of you, 5 hits of damage on a 15-second cooldown with a 60 energy cost. Keep in mind that similarly to Wanderer actually, while the damage of this burst is nice, it isn't going to be the main part of your kit, as most of your damage will come from your normal and charge attacks, especially if you don't have your second constellation. Because of this, for your talent priority, you want to level your normal attacks first, as this will increase both the damage of your normal and also your charge attacks, and then your elemental skill is also important, and lastly your elemental burst, being less important at C0 especially, but still worth leveling. Before moving on, I also wanted to mention that your Wriothesley's normal attack combo will not get reset by just dashing. It actually takes a bit longer, similarly to Ito, where you can do a few normals, dash, and then still continue your normal attack combo. It won't reset to a new one, which can be quite nice, allowing you to do a full normal attack combo, even if you have to dash to dodge attacks. Now, through my extensive testing, I have found out that this can actually be inconsistent. It seems that if you dash cancel at the wrong part of your animation, for whatever reason, your normal attack combo gets reset after you dash. While normally you can do things like this, where it would save, boom, you do your 4th hit and then your 5th hit. That's what your normal string looks like. Sometimes it can reset after a dash. Like here, as you can see, I do 2 normals, dash, and then 2 normals, and then dash, and then 2 normals, and my combo doesn't progress because of my timing. I'm sorry if this is hard to showcase. It might seem like a skill issue, but it's just something that I wanted to mention, that normally your combo, if you dash at the right time, will save, but it seems like if you mess up the dash timing or for whatever other reason, sometimes it won't and your combo will not progress. Like here it's 1 and then 1 and then 1. All right, now for more information regarding Wriothesley's playstyle, here are the important things that I really want to mention. First of all, most of your damage is going to come from your normal and charge attacks. The way you typically want to be playing him and comboing with him is setting up all of your characters, your support characters, abilities and buffs before swapping into your main DPS, who is Wriothesley in this case, and then doing strings of 4 to 5 normal attacks after using your skill to buff yourself, and using your burst whenever you have it, which will typically be every other rotation, especially at C0. Now with Wriothesley in particular, you need to be very mindful of your HP and your HP management, as in order for your normal attacks to do a lot of damage, as we saw earlier, you need to be above 50% HP. While you can heal back up a significant amount with your charge attacks, this is only possible when you're under 60% HP, and so your overall combo will typically be to spam your normal attacks and weave in a charge attack anytime your HP drops below 60%. Now, a very important thing I want to talk about though is actually how this is going to end up being in practice, what your HP is going to look like, and whether or not you need a healer. Now, while we could cover this in a bit more detail in the team section later, I think it's important now to mention that I personally believe that at C0, running him with a healer makes him feel a lot more consistent, whereas with his first constellation, you can run him without a healer with no problem, as it's a constellation that solves one of the issues of his kit that I'm about to talk about. In fact, his combo is typically going to be HP negative if you use your skill and are constantly normal attacking and charge attack when it's off cooldown and you're low HP. Because of how much HP you're consuming with every normal attack, the more rotations you do, starting again at not full HP, you will end up losing more HP that you're gaining, on top of the fact that you may get hit by enemies. And also, if you're under 50% HP, not only are your normal attacks a lot worse, but you just won't generate energy. So to avoid this and to be more consistent, I typically highly recommend running a healer with Wriothesley unless you have his first constellation. Now, worth noting that you can also spam some charge attacks after a while if you don't want to lose any more HP from your normal attacks, which can make your combo HP neutral, but it makes it stamina negative because your charge attacks cost 50 stamina each and typically are a bit less efficient than normal attacking. And so while it's technically viable, even at C0 to run him with no healer, try to manipulate your HP and charge attack spam as much as you can. It oftentimes won't be realistic, and while it can technically help maximize your Wriothesley's personal damage, because with a healer you won't get your enhanced charge attacks because your HP will be above 60%, it's much more annoying to play, doesn't really work after many rotations, and a lot of healers are just good characters with him anyways, like Bennett, Mika, or others that we'll talk about. Because of this, what I recommend is to run a healer at C0, just kind of not thinking about it that much and doing what I guess would recommend to most people, which is run a healer for convenience, use them when you have to, and use your normal attacks primarily for most of your damage until your HP gets low naturally, then use a charge attack whenever you're under 60% HP, getting like 1 to 2 per rotation and not focusing too much effort on getting it as often as you can. Yes, your charge attacks are great and they're a central part of your kit, but because of the weirdness of not running a healer versus running a healer, at least with the current units we have, I think they should just be a bonus that you generally will use whenever your HP drops below 60%. I don't want to make this section too long, but I feel like this is something that I really wanted to clarify because Wriothesley is a character with a very unique kit. Overall though, for my unfiltered thoughts on Wriothesley, here they are. While at C0, you mostly are going to be spamming normal attacks, and it's a shame that you can't charge attack as much. I wish his C1 was a part of his kit. Again, we'll cover this in the constellation section. I don't want to ramble too long now, and he feels a little bit more limited. With that in mind, he still is a decently strong carry. Like, he can genuinely be a good option, a replaceable one. Like, there's other crowd characters you can use. He's not needed by any means, but he can definitely be a strong main carry option, capable of clearing all the content in the game, and one who you can get a surprising amount of value out of when played and built efficiently. Personally, I am biased to really liking Wriothesley because I like his design a lot, and I do think his gameplay is pretty fun, although he is a character who will feel a lot stronger with certain key upgrades like certain teammates, weapons, and also C1. With that in mind, I'm now going to show you guys how to get the most value out of his build and teams to really make him feel like as strong of a carry as possible. Alright, now moving on, let's talk about how you actually want to build Wriothesley to get the most value out of him. First of all, for the artifact sets you're looking for, while there are a few options, your general go-to best in slot will be the 4-piece Maréchaussée Hunter. This is good in any team comp and any playstyle because it will straight up give you 15% normal and charge attack damage on the 2-piece, and then a 4-piece set that'll give you up to 36% crit rate when your HP increases or decreases. This 36% crit rate will be very easy to get because Wriothesley's HP will consistently change throughout your rotation, as he is a character who can consume his own HP and also even heal it back up. You may also run a healer or take damage from enemies, making this 4-piece set all the more consistent, on top of just being able to proc it reliably by yourself anyways. For those reasons, I recommend 4-piece Maréchaussée for 36% crit rate and 15% additional damage to your normal and charge attack as your general best in slot. With that in mind, there are other viable sets, and actually in a freeze team, if you're playing him in freeze specifically, the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer can actually be your best in slot, giving you 15% crowd damage bonus and 40% 40% crit rate, which obviously is more than 36. So it would be the best for a freeze team if you are keeping enemies frozen. In mono cryo, even without a freeze, it is fine, but you lose out on 20 crit rate, so it won't be as good. Also worth noting with this set though is that your Wriothesley's charge attacks will shatter enemies, so you can sometimes unfreeze them and have a bit worse freeze up time, but generally in practice, as long as you have enough Hydra application, this won't really matter. It's just something that you should be aware of. Outside of Wriothesley or Blizzard Strayer, while these are the two most recommended options, if you don't have them, there are viable alternatives like 4-piece Shimenawas for a ton of normal and charge attack damage, although you will lose out on some energy, but this is mostly fine as Wriothesley's burst isn't the main part of his kit anyways. 4-piece Desert Pavilion for some normal attack damage, 4-piece Echoes of an Offering being similar but slightly worse, and also not functioning as well on high ping randomly, or 4-piece Vermilion, which has potential to be really good, but it requires you to burst every rotation, which would require a lot of energy recharge, making it less of a recommended option. You can also do some things like 4 Gilded Dreams and Melt, or really just mix and match any offensive 2-pieces like the ones you're seeing on screen. Generally speaking though, keep things simple and either consider Blizzard Strayer in a freeze team or go Wriothesley just as the best general option, being the best by far in any team other than freeze, and even in freeze it's comparable, being only slightly worse. Moving on, let's talk about the best stats for your Wriothesley and what you're actually looking for on each artifact. Well, first of all, to maximize your damage, looking for stats like crit rate and crit damage are going to be the best. Attack percent is great as well, as with pretty much any attack scaling carry, but the more unique things to know about his kit are the following. First of all, regarding how much energy recharge you need, typically if you want to burst every rotation, you'll need a lot. However, this isn't something that I recommend because similarly to Wanderer, most of his damage comes from his normals and charge attacks, and so if you build that much ER and you try to burst every rotation, while it can be more viable with your second constellation, which we'll talk about later, generally it will be a waste of DPS when compared to building offensive stats like crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent, and bursting every other rotation, which you can typically get naturally without even needing energy recharge, or just by having a few substats here and there on your artifacts. Because of that, having a low amount of energy recharge, like 0 to 20%, is typically recommended as you'll be using your burst every other rotation and focusing on more offensive stats. Something else you need to know is that the 4-piece Wriothesley Hunter or Blizzard Strayer, which are his two best artifact sets, will be giving you a lot of crit rate, either 36 or 40%, on top of additional sources of crit rate like the Cryo Resonance in a team that will leave enemies cryo afflicted, like Mono Cryo or Freeze, or even his signature weapon, which will give you crit rate. Because of all this, you can be looking for a bit more crit damage than crit rate a lot of the time, but having more crit rate is still very important. Make sure you're trying to be as close as possible to a 1-to-2 ratio when factoring in all your external sources of crit rate. Regarding Elemental Mastery, this can also be a fine stat if you're melting, typically being around as good as attack percent, either better or worse depending on how many external sources of EM or attack you have, as the more you have, the less it's needed. With that in mind, the main stats you're looking for are the following. First of all, you will go for crit damage on your circlet, generally speaking, although crit rate can be viable as well if you really don't have enough on your substats. For your Goblet, you definitely want crowd damage bonus, and for your Sands, attack percent is the best general option, with Elemental Mastery being viable in melt teams specifically. In those melt teams, EM and attack are pretty interchangeable depending on how often you're melting and how much Elemental Mastery you have on your substats, so typically you can pick whichever one you have that has better substats in a melt team specifically, whereas for every other Wriothesley build, any other team, you would want to go for an attack percent Sands as the most consistent and strongest option. Alright, next up, let's talk about Wriothesley's best weapons. Now for this section, you'll be pleased to hear that he has a lot of good options for every type of player. First of all, I have to say that his signature weapon, Cashflow Supervision, is going to be his best in slot. This weapon is insane because it gives you a really high base attack, 22% crit rate, and then an effect made for him. You get 16% attack and up to 48% normal attack damage and 42% charge attack damage passively as your HP changes. More precisely, it'll be 16% normal attack damage and 14% charge attack damage per stack, stacking up to 3 times, and each of these stacks proccing when your HP changes, which is really easy to proc on Wriothesley. That wasn't enough, you'll also gain 8% attack speed when you're fully stacked, making this just a really nice weapon for him. Now, I did want to mention though that Wanderer's signature weapon, this Bell Catalyst, is honestly not far behind and is going to be your second best in slot, generally speaking, if you have it as well, as it has similar stats, the same base attack and 44% crit damage, with an effect that will greatly increase your normal attack damage. And Wriothesley is a character who, as we saw, is going to be spamming his normal attacks, so he can really make use of Skara's signature as well. These are going to be his two best weapons, with Cashflow being his best in slot, and they are quite significantly ahead of other weapons, generally speaking. With that in mind though, there are other really good options, like in a melt team, Nahita's signature, which gives you Elemental Mastery and Elemental Damage bonus, is a great option, provided you are melting and can use the EM. Other 5-star catalysts are good stat sticks, because generally catalyst DPSs have access to just any of the available stat sticks, like Lost Prayers, Skyward Atlas, Memory of Dust if you're shielded, or even Tome of Eternal Flow, even if this weapon's effect isn't really that great as it only gives you charge attack damage and HP, me, the insane amount of crit damage you're gaining makes it a viable stat stick. Outside of that though, Wriothesley does have good 4 stars as well, so don't feel like you need a 5 star. In fact, you even have good free-to-play options like Flowing Purity or Ballad of the Boundless Blue, the new event weapon that you can get and refine for free. Both of these weapons are pretty similar in strength. Ballad of the Boundless Blue giving you normal and charge attack damage, as well as energy recharge, which is a nice bonus even though it's not needed, and Flowing Purity giving you a lot of attack and then an effect that will give you just a ton of elemental damage bonus. At R5, this weapon will give you up to 40% damage bonus on top of a high base attack and attack percent stat, which makes it just amazing if you can make use of this bond of life that you're gaining, meaning you're running a healer that can actually manage to heal you and proc its effect. While some characters can have consistency issues with this catalyst, since Wriothesley consumes his own HP, as long as you have a healer healing him up, there shouldn't really be a big issue. Flowing Purity and Boundless Blue are very similar in strength, as we'll see in the weapon ranking coming up shortly, as far as free-to-play options go, so both of them are really good. You can pick whichever one you have, and keep in mind that one of them is a limited time event weapon, whereas the other one you can craft at any time, but also it will cost billets and might not be easy for everyone to refine all the way, as that will cost 5 of those billets. With that in mind though, both are good options, similar in strength. Ballad of the Boundless Blue can be a bit better, especially if you can use the energy recharge, whereas Flowing Purity can be slightly better and slightly more recommended overall, provided you don't really need the ER. Outside of that though, there are other good 4-star options that can be a bit better, like notably Witsith if you can make use of its effect. Witsith is a really good weapon for front-loaded damage, as it'll buff you for 10 seconds with a 30-second cooldown, with these buffs scaling quite significantly with refinements. And while this weapon does get better with refinement, it's still viable to use even at R1. Blackcliff Agate can be viable as well for the crit damage. And regarding Solar Pearl, while this does seem nice on paper for Wriothesley, what you need to realize is that his elemental skill doesn't actually deal damage. Like, his elemental skill is a buff to his normal attacks, so the only way to buff your normal attack damage with the Solar Pearl's effect is by dealing damage with an elemental burst, which you may not even be using every rotation, and the buff will only last for 6 seconds, so it's kind of inconsistent. It's not the most recommended option for Wriothesley, but it can be a viable stat stick if you don't have a viable option. It's just generally not the best. Also, I wanted to add that the Mappa Mare can be viable in a melt team as a decent craftable alternative for the elemental mastery and elemental damage bonus that it does give you. With that in mind, I'm now going to put a weapon ranking on screen for Wriothesley for both a melt and a mono cryo team to give you an idea of how good each weapon is for him. Keep in mind though that this is a general ranking. Don't use it as an exact one, as it will vary heavily based on many factors like your exact team, rotation, artifacts, substats, and so much more. So really keep in mind that it's a general ranking, but it does go to show that his signature and Wanderer's weapons are both really good. There are many good 5 stars and even decent free-to-play options that you can use depending on which ones you have or plan on getting. All right, now with that in mind, let's finally talk about Wriothesley's Constellations. Now, while Wriothesley is a perfectly fine unit at C0, and that's what most of this guide is about, I do need to mention that his first Constellation is, in my opinion, very, very good and also a huge quality of life increase. This is because what your first Constellation does is actually a lot of things. First of all, whenever your Wriothesley is either under 6% HP or inside of his elemental skill, you will naturally gain a gracious Rebuke stack anytime you do a 5 normal attack combo. This can be triggered once every 2.5 seconds and means that at the end of your normal attack string, after doing 5 normal attacks, you get an enhanced charge attack that will deal bonus damage, not consume stamina, and also heal you up. If that wasn't enough, when you do have this gracious Rebuke and your charge attack is enhanced, the damage bonus you gain will go from 50% more to 200% more, making it just a lot more damage on every enhanced charge attack that you do. If that wasn't enough, when you use this charge attack inside of your elemental skill, it will extend its duration by 4 seconds, giving it a 14-second uptime instead of just its 10-second that it would have without any constellations, meaning that you can spend longer on field inside of your skill, do more damage with your charge attacks, and also charge attack more often, healing up more often, not needing to always be under 60% HP to get a strong charge attack, and just make it a really nice, comfy constellation for more damage, more healing, and making Wriothesley feel like honestly a more complete unit in my opinion. While I think he's perfectly fine and can be very strong even at C0, I genuinely believe that his first constellation is one of the bigger C1 increases, similar to someone like Hu Tao, where your quality of life but also your damage will increase significantly. I don't want anyone to feel forced to pull for a constellation, but if you like Wriothesley and plan on using him, then getting this particular C1 for your main DPS can definitely be a good idea that I personally want to go for. Keep in mind that if you get this constellation, you want to be spamming your 5 normal attack combo and doing a charge attack after in order to maximize its value. What's also worth noting is that since you can proc your special charge attack just from 5 normal attacks and you don't actually need to be under 60% HP to get your enhanced charge attack, this means that you can heal more often. You can gain your 30% HP up to once every 2.5 seconds, making your combos generally heal you and allow you to not run a healer in your team and therefore be more consistent and run stronger support supports as well. It does make me a little sad that his C1 makes him feel like a completely different unit. I kind of wish he had parts of this just inherently in his kit, but with that said, this Constellation is definitely really good. Changes his playstyle, gives him more damage, flexibility, and just makes him feel that much stronger. Moving on for your second Constellation, this is very similar to Wander's C2, where you will gain just more damage on your burst. You will get 40% more damage for each stack of your passive talent, and your passive can stack 5 times, so up to 200% more burst damage, making your burst more valuable and making it something that you want to use as often as you can. Moving on, your third and fifth Constellation will increase your talent levels, but your third one actually will increase your normal attack levels, which is very relevant and a pretty nice DPS increase as well. Your fourth Constellation will give you more healing on your enhanced charge attacks, 50% instead of 30, while also giving you a free 20% attack speed if you ever get excess healing. This lasts for 4 seconds and actually is quite nice because more attack speed on a normal and charge attacking character means you can get more attacks in and therefore more damage. On top of that, if you're off field, your party members will gain 10% attack speed for 6 seconds, but that is less relevant. Lastly, for Wriothesley's 6th Constellation, this one looks pretty busted, at least as far as like a C6 goes, especially when you synergize it with like Shenhe and other buffing supports, as your enhanced charge attack will gain 10 crit rate and 80 crit damage, on top of having an additional instance of damage, an additional icicle that will deal 100% of your charge attack's base damage. This makes your charge attack just way stronger and gives it an additional hit as well. Overall, Wriothesley is a character with really great constellations, genuinely, but I don't want anyone to feel forced to get any. Personally, I do recommend his first constellation for some really nice quality of life, and it's also a really good early stopping point, although he is still fine at C0. Alright, now with all that out of the way, let's get into one of the most important sections, which is regarding Wriothesley's best teams and characters that he synergizes well with. So first of all, a team archetype that works pretty well with Wriothesley consistently is going to be a reverse melt team. In this team, Wriothesley is going to be melting quite a few of his different hits when paired alongside cryo and pyro supports. In a team like this, you can run him with power characters such as Bennett and Xiangling. Bennett being a great healer option, typically the best for not just a good amount of healing, but also a ton of attack percent, on top of being a pyro battery for another character you can run like Xiangling, who will apply a lot of pyro, deal really good damage, and allow your Wriothesley to melt a few of his hits. While Xiangling is obviously a carry of her own, more so than a support, she will also be enabling your Wriothesley, and both of them will be doing really good damage in a team like this. The other character in this team is very flexible. Shenhe is a great option, widely considered to be like the best one, as a cryo character who has good synergy with Wriothesley. While there's other options that I'll cover, I do want to mention that for Shenhe in particular, what makes her nice with Wriothesley and cryo characters in general is the fact that she will not only reduce the cryo res of enemies, but will also increase the cryo damage that you deal thanks to her icy quills from your skill. Do note though that exceptionally in a Wriothesley team, you would want to be using your hold E on Shenhe, holding your skill to actually increase the normal and charge attack damage of Wriothesley instead of the standard press, which would increase your skill and burst damage. Shenhe can also give you some cryo particles and access to the cryo resonance as well, but this is more or less relevant in a melt team as enemies will mostly be pyro afflicted. With that in mind, reverse melt teams are pretty good for Wriothesley, one of the go-to options, but keep in mind that a lot of these slots here are flexible. You could use Shenhe or another cryo option, or you could even use another character of a different element like Kazuha, who could swirl either pyro or cryo or both, although double swirling is hard in this team, but maybe in the second rotation, which will increase your damage, give you elemental damage bonus, reduce the resistance of enemies, and group them up efficiently. You can also run another option like Zhongli, who gives you a shield as well as resistance shred. Overall, reverse melt is a pretty easy team to play and a pretty flexible one, and Wriothesley, while he isn't the only cryo option you can use here, he is somewhat replaceable, is a good on-field driver who can carry this team alongside your powerful supports as well. You can also play a Jean Sunfire team, using her alongside Bennett and a flex slot like Shenhe to swirl cryo and also self-swirl pyro thanks to Bennett's pyro infusion and her ultimate, allowing you to proc the Verdescent Venerer set on cryo and also melt on your Wriothesley. Moving on, there are other team comps like Freeze where you could play Wriothesley in either a traditional Freeze team like an Ayaka one where you'd run someone like Shenhe, Kokomi, and Kazuha, or a more on-hit one since Wriothesley is a normal attacker, running him alongside characters like Yelan and Xingqiu. Here you get a ton of damage, especially single target damage, with both your Yelan and your Xingqiu's rain swords. Your last slot here is very flexible. Typically, especially without C1, I would recommend a healer for the reasons we mentioned earlier in the video, and there are a lot of different options here. You can do an Anemo healer like Jean if you want to swirl cryo or hydro, or even someone like Bennett who won't apply too much pyro but will give you a ton of attack percent, or exceptionally also someone like Mika who will give you access to the cryo resonance on top of being a healer, who also gives you not just some attack speed, which will give you more damage by being able to attack faster, but also a huge amount of AoE healing in a burst form without having too much like overtime healing, which allows your Wriothesley to still manage to keep his HP under 60% and then heal back up instantly whenever needed. Mika's still not the best option though, but he is more viable with Wriothesley than with other units. Still not meta or anything, but definitely worth mentioning as a viable option. option. Generally, freeze teams work quite well with Wriothesley, even though his charge attacks can shatter enemies. It's pretty consistent. Just keep in mind that it doesn't work that well against bosses who can't be frozen, and in those teams, well, you can still run freeze because you have a lot of single target damage with Wriothesley, Yelan, and Xingqiu. But in a team like this, you could also switch out your freeze and turn it into a mono crowd team where you don't need to freeze enemies and can focus on your crowd damage instead. And while these are the main go-to crowd teams, notably freeze and reverse melt, you can also go some other teams, like for example a hyper bloom or hyper fridge team where you're running hyper bloom with your off-field characters and then Wriothesley as your on-field driver, doing good personal damage while also applying cryo and allowing you to effectively get more blooms thanks to the way that the cryo and dendro elements interact with one another, allowing you to have a surprisingly strong team. You can also play Wriothesley in a burn melt team where you can apply burning on enemies with a dendro and pyro character and then use Wriothesley once again to get some melts for himself on top of the burning reaction that'll be applied. There are many variations of this team. You can even run a pyro carry like Xiangling or pyro swirl with Kazuha here, or you could technically turn this into a team where you might also be able to burgeon and vaporize if you run a hydro character. But keep in mind that I think this isn't really possible with the units we have now. It may be when Farina comes out. Like, we don't know what she's gonna do. It's still too early to tell, but since we know that Wriothesley and Neviette for that matter have HP changing mechanics, there's a good chance that the Hydra Archon Farina is either similar or has synergy with them. So just keep an eye out for that. I know that when I recorded my Nilou guide before Nahida came out, like literally the next patch, Nahida then came and became the best for a Nilou team. And so there's a good chance that Farina does have good synergy with Fontaine units like Wriothesley. So just keep that in mind for the future. And I'll add a pinned comment if needed. For now though, his teams are pretty straightforward. Other synergies I wanted to mention include characters like Yunjin. If you want more normal attack damage, now obviously there are some problems with Yunjin, like she'll need a lot of energy and she isn't like the most recommended option, but definitely is a viable one if you have a flex slot in your team. Overall, I do like quite a bit of his different teams, notably freeze and reverse melt though, with my personal favorites being reverse melt as a team comp that I genuinely have always really liked. And I think Wriothesley can slot in this team and feel quite nice as your on-field auto attacker. Do note that if you have his first constellation, you no longer will need a healer in a lot of his teams, but in a lot of situations in practice, you'd still want to run some of the healers like Bennett, who just always is a good option because of his attack buff, or on the contrary, in a freeze team, you may not have needed a healer anyways in the first place if you're freezing enemies enough, whereas if you're not, or against enemies that can't be frozen, then your C1 can be a really nice quality of life upgrade, allowing you to no longer need a healer in the team building process. All right, now with that out of the way, let's get into the showcase of my Wriothesley in this reverse melt team. We're gonna be using him on a pretty standard build for Maréchaussée, his signature weapon R1, and no constellations activated. His talents are level 9, 8, 8, and he has a pretty good ratio of, you know, a lot of crit damage, a lot of crit rate with Maréchaussée, and a decent amount of attack as well. Hope you enjoyed the guide, and I hope you'll enjoy the showcase. Let's go.
Everybody stand back! Eat this!
Have a seat. One now.
My will embodied! Do your master's bidding! Teamwork is dreamwork! You're toast!
Face your gift.
Divine, take your true form! Everybody stand back!
For more, please.
Do your master's bidding! Transfiguration! Teamwork is dreamwork! Let's lock eat this! Get them!
For more, please.
Transfiguration! Cryo incarnate! Let's light it up! Go on it! You're toast! I'm the fried pan.
Stay cool. Face your gift. One now. Time to
A grand surprise! Still? Try.
Overall, Riz is a character that I personally do really like. I think his design is sick and he's pretty fun, and you can get a lot of value out of him in these specific teams that I mentioned. Obviously, his C1 is a big upgrade if you want to get it, but even without it, he can be pretty strong when played and built efficiently, and I hope I did a good job at showing that in this video. Hopefully, you don't mind the guide being a bit longer than usual. I hope you enjoyed, and if there's anything I want to add, as always, it will be in a pinned comment. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.